Have you ever picked a fight with somebody and then you got started and then you realize, whoo, man, maybe this wasn't the best idea? And maybe you got it handed to you? Well, that's kind of what happens in today's Bible reading. Welcome to another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. And today we are going through 2 Kings chapter 22 and 23 and 2 Chronicles chapter 34 and 35. So we're going to dive right in. So today we're talking about Josiah. We've talked about him before, the child king. But today in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, we're seeing a good depiction of his life, so to speak. In the very beginning, of course, we get this formal statement that he was 8 years old when he became king. We learned about him being the boy king a long time ago. But he walked in all the ways of David, and he turned neither to the left or to the right. He was focused on God. He was obedient to God, but not perfectly obedient to God. And we'll see that as we go on. We get into chapter 22, verses 9 and 10 here in 2 Kings. And Shaphan here, which was a secretary, he seems to not have appreciated the significance of the discovery of the book of law, because he leads his report to the king with the report of financial diligence first, and then he kind of gets to the book later. Oh yeah, and by the way, we found this book as well, which was probably a scroll of some sort. It was likely the book of Deuteronomy, but it could have been the whole Pentateuch. But they just describe it here in 2 Kings as simply a book. But whatever had happened, in verse 11, the king heard these words and he tore his clothes. So whatever happened, the king had been ignorant of some provisions of the law, clearly because he realized he has messed up and that he wasn't being as obedient to God as he thought he was. So we get to chapter 23. He is he renews his covenant with God. He makes all these reforms, and all these purifying works of this chapter begin very quickly after the discovery of this law, since assuming chronological sequencing here, these works culminated in the great Passover remembrance, which still happened in Josiah's 18th year. So all this happened in a very short time frame. King Josiah then, he committed himself to obedience to the covenant. Remember, we talked yesterday about obedience. How do you measure success? Well, God measures success with how obedient you are to him. So here he was trying to be successful, so to speak. But apparently Josiah here, at this point, his devotion to the Lord became exclusive, and that was it. He was going to cleanse Judah from all false worship right off the bat. And he starts doing it, getting rid of all those places, anything related to Baal or the worship of any other gods. He got rid of it, burned it up, threw it away, trashed it. And then he starts the cleansing of this northern territory. And 23 verses 15 through 20, it's almost certain that this cleansing of the north took place in a brief time period between the fall of the Assyrian Empire administration of Samaria and the time when the Egyptians seized control of Judah. It's kind of difficult to tell, though, whether this was a political expansionism or religious cleansing or maybe a little bit of both. I'm kind of assuming it's probably a little bit of both. But Josiah didn't have to travel very far to cleanse the north. He was talking about Bethel here, and Bethel was only about 10 miles to the north of where he was. And again, he desecrated all these sites with human remains. And the significance here, though, is that this fulfilled the prophecy of 1 Kings chapter 13, verses 1 and 2, if you want to review that. But the gold calf had already been carried off by the Assyrians previously, so he didn't have to do anything with that. The high point of Josiah's reforms was definitely the Passover celebration, but we don't hear a lot about it in Kings. And then we get to Josiah's death. There's not a whole lot about Josiah's death in 2 Kings either, because here we are in chapter 23, and in verse 29 it says, during his reign, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, marched up to help the king of Assyria at the Euphrates River. King Josiah went to confront him And at Megiddo, when Necho saw him, he killed him. That's it. That's all it says. So did the kings? Did they cross swords? Did they fight? And they have this showdown, and King Necho ends up on top? Or did something else happen? It kind of leaves a whole lot up to your imagination at this point. But never fear, the answer is in the next part of our reading for the day, which is 2nd Chronicles. So bear with me. We're going through chapter 34 and 35, I believe it was. And this gives tons and tons of details on Josiah's reforms. Way more details than we read about in Kings. His repairs to the temple, the discovery of the book of law, and some of the reasoning why he tore his clothes. You see, when Shaphan, the king's secretary, started to read what was in the book, the king was overcome with dread because he knew that Judah had not kept the word of the Lord for a very long time, and he thought that severe punishment was very likely and probably imminent. In other words, it's probably going to happen pretty soon. So Josiah wanted specific guidance from the Lord about what he should do. So, of course, he consulted the prophetess. We did read about that in 2 Kings to determine what God's perspective was on this situation. And because of Josiah's attitude of repentance and his willingness to obey God, the calamities would not happen until after his death. Well, actually, in my opinion, his death was kind of a calamity in itself. But so I guess the calamities start at his death. And then, of course, we get lots of details about the Passover observance. And one verse that stuck out to me in particular was verse 3 in chapter 35. This verse is the last time the Ark of the Covenant is mentioned in the Old Testament. Josiah's explanation to the Levites that they no longer needed to carry the ark on their shoulders reflects the fact that they learned about this practice when they read the newly discovered book of the law that we just talked about. And they may have been holding it on their shoulders ever since. The other possibility is that Manasseh had made the Levites remove the ark when he desecrated the temple and made them carry it in procession on special occasions. So that's how they would know about how to carry it that way. But Josiah assured them that the ark would once again have a proper and permanent resting place in the temple. So let's get back to that Josiah's last deeds and Josiah's death. How did Josiah die? Was he in a fisticuffs fight with Necho? Well, actually, it wasn't anything like that at all. See, King Necho of Egypt, he marched up to fight at Carchemish by the Euphrates, and of course this was with the Assyrians, and Josiah went out to confront him, but Necho sent messengers to him and said, "What is the issue between you and me, you king of Judah? I have not come against you today, but I'm coming to fight against these dudes over here, this other dynasty. God told me to hurry, so stop opposing God who is with me, and don't make him destroy you." But Josiah did not turn away from him. Instead, in order to fight with him, he ordered to fight with him, and to do so, he disguised himself so he could sneak up to him to fight him. Well, he didn't listen to Necho's words that came straight from the mouth of God that he says, but instead he went to fight him. So the archers shot King Josiah. And Josiah said, "Take me away, for I am severely wounded." He'd been shot with the arrow. So his servants took him out of his war chariot and carried him in a second chariot and brought him to Jerusalem. And that is where he died. Now, I just find it so ironic that one of the very best kings of Judah was killed in a manner remarkably similar to Ahab, who was perhaps the worst king of Israel that there ever was. And that was back in 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verses 29 through 34, if you want to review that story. So, the moral of this story is, listen to God and pick your fights wisely. That's how I would say it. So, I hope this has touched you. If it has, click that like button, subscribe button, the follow button, click that little boxing glove so we can rumble together on Rumble. And of course, turn turn on your notifications. Click that little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. We'll see you then.